Welcome to the Sharp Mind Show, episode 3. Let's get right into it. Google to retain its Chrome browser and its Android operating system, but they have been imposed some data sharing obligations with its competitors, right? So, what does this mean? So, Google has been rising most of this year, but it's been down, all the way down to 150 back in April. So Google was all the way down to 150 back in April. So it put it into the range where you start talking about, it's like even now, even after the pop, after this news, it's still at a PE ratio of 22, right? So it's still in that value investor range, even now, after this win, right? And Google basically prints money, right? Their dividend is very small, but Google basically prints money. And, so basically as a value investor, you saw this, back in April, you said, okay, Google's down. It's getting into your PE ratio area. Like I said, they don't give you a lot to hold it, but, 153, and now with the pop, it's up to 223 so far already this morning, just from one day. But what does this mean actually, like, for Google, right? So this basically means Google gets to keep its Chrome and all the data that Chrome collects, right? Because Chrome basically collects a lot of data, and honestly, so many people use Chrome. I still use Chrome, right? But it allows it to connect it with Gemini and Android at the same time. And therefore, you got Chrome. So all the people on Chrome plus Gemini, the AI. So being able to, most people think that, that Google is dead, or, people are not using Google to search for things anymore. And that's not true because of Gemini, the integration with Gemini. Right. So basically, if they can, put that with Android and put that with the Chrome browser and keep that going, like you're talking about, people really, so you got the Google Home in the house as well. Right. So, you connect all that with Gemini and all that with AI, and all of a sudden you have this big, huge powerhouse giant again in Google. Right. But this is a perfect example of what a value investment looks like, right? Google's all the way down to the 150s because of this lawsuit about them being broken up as a monopoly. And luckily for them, competitors came to market like OpenAI, like Grok and Twitter, so that, people, let's say all these competitors came into the market, and it made it where all of a sudden it wasn't this big, huge, giant conglomerate anymore. So therefore, you could actually have a defense like, hey, we actually have competitors in this market, right? So I'm a big believer in Google. I think, Google's still very undervalued at 223. Obviously, it's not financial advice, but Google being able to keep Chrome is a big deal for Google. And definitely it's going to hurt its competitors. But let's say Gemini and Android are probably going, like, iPhone is not keeping up with Android right now, but it's still very popular. But Apple's having a hard time with AI, so you may see a big drop in Apple and a big win for Google and its Google phones with Android, right? It's my 2 cents on it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is Google going to increase because of this ruling, or go back to where it was at as far as stock price? Is it going to take more of the market share than it already has? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll head on to the next story. Just remember, this show is brought to you by InserSale.com. Go pick you up a cool inspirational t-shirt today. I'm wearing the Mindset Skill Set Habits and Success shirt. So go pick that up if you're interested. All right, so next story. This one's crazy, right? Man marries 3 women, right? Irvine Burdick Jr. is accused of bigomy, right? All three marriages took place in North Carolina, in Lincoln County, Davidson County, and Guilford County, right? So 3 separate counties this man got married in. So now, if you saw a picture of this guy, you're like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, how did this even happen, right? But this just goes to show you that even if you're an ugly man, you know, you can still pick up women. So this man, not only did he pick up women, but he convinced 3 people to marry him, right? So, you know, it's pretty wild, number one. Number two, you know, I read some of the comments on the story, and some of the comments are like, you know, give him time served, or, you know, he should go to the Middle East, obviously, if he wants multiple wives. But the big thing here is that he was actually soliciting these women so that he could steal their money, right? Which is even crazier considering what he looks like. But his personality must be amazing. But so, you know, we've all seen Heartbreakers back in the day with Jennifer Love Hewitt, you know, and they, you know, convince them to marry him, that kind of thing, gets divorced because of cheating, blah, blah, blah. But basically, this is what this guy did in real life with 3 different women, right? He basically, you know, convinced them to marry him, took all their money, and went on to the next person and took all their money, and went on to the next person, took all their money. Now, this is probably a lot smaller scale. You know, these women may not have had, you know, crazy amounts of money, but this man just, you know, it's really like one of those impressive things, right? That it's like, how did you convince 3 women to marry you and then go to different counties and marry 3 different women, right? But like I say, he's in jail, accused of felony bigamy. So, you know, he's probably going to jail. But like I said, I think some of the comments were pretty funny, and that's pretty much it for that story. But, you know, can you imagine being married to 3 different women? But, you know, like I said, he definitely took advantage of these women, and hopefully they get justice and get their money back, right? All right, so story number 3. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsy secretly get a prenup, right? So Travis Kelsy, being an NFL football player, he's worth about $70 million. Taylor Swift, being the international superstar that she is worth about $1.7 billion. She's not a multi-billionaire yet, but she's pretty freaking close. And so, of course, when you got that much money, you got to think about protecting that money that you're coming into the marriage with, right? So they're getting a prenup, right? And agreeing on that kind of stuff. But this goes to show you that, you know, this isn't the same Taylor Swift that, you know, we grew up with, right? Like, I remember a video of Taylor Swift talking about, like, if she wasn't a successful singer, that she would just write songs, and that would be okay with her because she just loves to write songs. So this is going back to the business principles, right? It's like, what would you do forever even if you weren't getting paid for it, right? And that's basically what she's done and how she's made her career, right? Because she's not like, Taylor Swift is not this crazy good singer, right? She's not Christina Aguilera, right? But same thing with, like, back in the day, Britney Spears. Britney Spears wasn't this crazy good singer, but she was a good entertainer. Well, Taylor Swift is not really a good singer per se, but she makes great songs. She's a good writer of songs because that's what she loves to do. And then she puts on a great show. I mean, she had to, book stadiums for how many people wanted to see her every night, right? So she literally made $1 billion off a tour, right? So obviously she's going to protect that. Not really a surprise here, in my opinion. Some people were surprised that they would get a prenup. Like, is it really love if you get a prenup? Of course it's still love. Honestly, if you ask your partner to get a prenup and they agree to the prenup, it's, in principle, it's just like, okay, well, I'm not here for your money, so, doesn't care. But basically, like, so the way I set things up, right, is that the longer my partner is with me, the richer my partner is going to get, right? So every holiday, every month, every holiday, every birthday, every anniversary, I purchase my significant other, my wife. I purchase my wife's stock, right? So the longer she stays with me, the richer she's going to be, right? So eventually, 20 years down the road, and you're like, should I stay with this person, or you don't have to worry about that because the person's already rich. There's no monetary incentive left to keep staying. You're already rich, right? And so you're only with me because you want to be with me, right? And because that's some of the things that people worry about later in life. It's like, oh, you were only with me for my money or that kind of thing. Say, luckily for me, my wife chose me when I was broke as shit and walk into a beach shop and all kinds of stuff, so unemployed, actually. She actually chose me when I was unemployed. So, luckily I don't have to worry about stuff like that. But obviously, both of these people are worth, millions of dollars. Obviously, Taylor Swift's worth billions of dollars. And it's definitely, I think it's smart to have a prenup in this situation. But we'll see. Because it's definitely going to be especially when Travis Kelsy retires, it's going to be a different lifestyle than I think he might be used to. And sometimes it's very difficult to transition from that situation because, he's going to have 70 million, but that's going to be the only 70 million he ever gets, right? So he's got to figure out how to keep that 70 million while keeping up with someone like Taylor Swift, who's got billions of dollars, right? So that's the story on that. All right, we got one more for today. But just to say one more thing, let's say relationships are about trust, right? So if you have any doubts and you ask your partner if they would sign a prenup and they don't say yes, then pretty much you're not going to trust them anyway, right? Should already trust that, okay, I'm not here for your money, that type of thing, right? And so basically, if my partner had asked for a prenup, or if my wife had asked for a prenup, I obviously would have just said, okay, cool, whatever. But we had, very little to protect, if anything, really. So, but of course now you do, right? So that's all I have to say about relationships. Anyway, so Florence County, South Carolina, high school cheerleader is accused of instigating the fight that led to her boyfriend's death. And let's say this is a crazy story, right? So 17-year-old Gianna basically drove someone else to the scene where her boyfriend was, that led to escalation, that led to her boyfriend being killed in the street, right? And his name was Trey, and he was killed by 19-year-old Devan Raper, right? And 9 other people were also Nine other people were arrested in this case, right? But this goes back to my mother's rule number 1, right? And this one's derogatory, so this is just how my mother said it. Pussy will fuck you up, right? That's rule number one. So basically, you know, obviously you have a right to defend your wife from other people, that kind of thing. But we're talking about boyfriend, girlfriend, 16 years old, like that kind of thing. But basically this girl got into both people's heads, right? Like both of these guys' heads got them against each other, and it ended up in the death of one of them, right? So, you know, she's going to be, you know, charged for that. And, which is pretty wild if you think about it. But basically this is the kind of stuff that, you know, you can find yourself getting into, right? When you got multiple people after you, and you choose one and the other one's not, like, okay, it's basically a love triangle, right? And basically, can they prove with your text messages and stuff like that that you were the instigator in this love triangle that caused somebody to die, right? Now, you know, I don't really know what exactly she's going to be charged with. Hold on, I can look real quick. She is going to be charged with, let's see. Charged with accessory before the fact of a felony. Right, so she's basically charged as being an accessory to the fact of a felony. But, you know, she basically instigated this fight that caused somebody to die, and she's going to have to live with that, you know, for the rest of her life. But, you know, it's definitely very interesting that, you know, the news basically made, oh, she's a high school cheerleader, you know, oh, she's supposed to be this good person, you know, that kind of thing. I feel like stuff like this happens all the time, you know, where women put two men against each other or basically lead one on or whatever. But she actually drove the other person to the scene where her boyfriend was killed, right? So it's like, how did that happen? She was basically messing around with some other dude, an older boy, 19 years old. Probably should have been messing with anyway. She's 17. And basically ended up getting her, you know, her boyfriend killed, right? So, but that was the big lesson from this is that, you know, obviously, you know, most people can't control their emotions, but there comes a point where, you know, the beginning of a relationship is not really about emotion. It's about, will this person, now to me, like my number one thing is loyalty, right? So will this person be loyal to me? Obviously she's not loyal to this guy that died, Trey, because she was messing around with 19-year-old Devan Raper, right? But so if you don't, number one, I'm not going to insert my heart into something until you prove that you're loyal, right? And honestly, the amount of time it takes to kind of prove that you're loyal, you know, is a while. It's probably more than 2 or 3 years, really. But you prove your loyalty, and she definitely didn't do that here. Sorry, this young man died, and you know, we can learn that you have to kind of protect yourself from stuff like this, right? Especially as a young teenager, young boy. You know, but I guess he tried to fight for what he wanted and didn't work out for him. So sad story there in Florence, South Carolina. But that's really what we can learn is that women can mess you up, and, you know, to concentrate on what you have to do to be successful instead of concentrating on women, right? Women will come to you when you're successful, and there won't be any competition because you'll be successful, right? So I'm Nate, and I'm the Fit Future MD. This has been the So I'm Nate, the Fit Future MD. This has been the Sharp Minds Show, episode 3. It's been brought to you by London and the Googly Goo, which is my wife's book. If you haven't checked out London and the Googly Goo, it's a kid's book. It's very rhythmatic and rhyming and has a great moral to it. So if you hadn't picked that up, make sure you pick that up in the link in the description. Obviously, I am a life coach. So I'm a life coach. So if you're looking to, step up your life and maybe need to fix some things in your life, I can coach you through that kind of stuff. Click that link in the description as well. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace.